Welcome, everybody, to UFO Man Live. Tonight, we have a very special guest by the name of John MILOR. He is a retired Chief Master Sergeant from the Air National Guard. He's also a U.S. Army veteran. So please thank him for his service. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And he is also an author. He has written several books about Christianity and the connection to the UFO phenomenon. We will be discussing a little bit of that later this evening. Also, in regards to an encounter that he had in the Panama jungle back in 1989-90, around December of 89 into 90. So we're going to discuss that, and hopefully you'll be entertained and informed. That's our whole purpose here at UFO Man, is to be both entertaining and informative. So please welcome the esteemed John MILOR to our channel.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
Welcome.
So glad you're here.
Yeah.
So glad.
Thank you for having me on too.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm going to bring John up big screen here so everybody can see him. Okay, so John, can you tell us a little bit about your military background and how you got involved with the UFO phenomenon to begin with?
Okay, so the UFO phenomenon actually starts way before the military. It was the kind of person I was from the age of a toddler. I was always interested in mysterious things of an unknown nature. My hippie mother and my sister probably fostered that somewhat growing up. I had all these questions, and my mom would always humor me by answering every question that I asked in detail, and she didn't filter. So unlike a lot of kids, I would sit around and participate in the adult conversations from when I was a toddler.
Me too.
So
Same. I was pretty, yeah.
yes. So debatable as to whether, that was healthy or not, because I was exposed to a lot at a young age. But one of the things that really piqued my interest was always these stories about the unknown and, ghosts and things like that. And I'd often scare the tar out of myself, and my older sister didn't help in that regard. But, and so this interest in the paranormal kind of grew as I was a kid. Now, the Christian part, seeds were planted when I was a little kid. My great-grandmother planted those seeds, and my great-grandfather was there too. So my mom would drop me and my brother off at their house periodically, and I, would be watched by them, and they were fervent in the gospel. My great-grandfather was an evangelist, and during the Great Depression, they traveled throughout the United States, do the big tent revivals, Pentecostals, spoke in tongues, prayers, healing.
I was raised in the Pentecostal Assemblies of God churches.
Okay. My great-grandmother was involved in ministry her whole life, and she had like amazing testimonies that were like, really, she was saved by an angel, for example. She was dying from carbon monoxide poisoning, and she asked God for help because she thought she was going to die. And suddenly the bedroom door opened, and some guy grabbed her and rolled her over, and the room instantly cleared out, and she could breathe again. Interesting description of this person. He was a military soldier of some sort, and he was wearing a helmet with a spike on the top, which they were wearing back like 100 years ago in the Marines, I believe, a pickle hob helmet. So the description is interesting. I think it lends to credibility for her story, because it's not, glowing
Right.
being with wings or whatnot. He walked out, and she jumped out of bed and went into the living room where she saw him go, and the front door was locked with a chain across the door. So he vanished, and you had to be supernatural. He was there in response to a prayer. So she said he had to be an angel, but his
Okay.
description was not in the box. And she also almost died from a stroke later in life. She was hospitalized. They didn't know if she was going to talk or walk ever again. It was a severe stroke. And she said Jesus walked into her hospital room, bodily manifestation, just like a real flesh and blood person, except he was glowing. And he smiled at her, and the left side of her body instantly came back. He turned
Wow.
around and walked out. And when the doctors came back, she was ready to check out.
Right.
So they were like pretty astonished. And of course, she was telling everybody in her church, thank you for the prayers. It obviously worked. And, these are the kind of stories that you could expect from Grandma.
Right.
The story you wouldn't expect is a UFO sighting. But that's exactly what she told. And I remember back in 1975, it was a family gathering. So it was probably Thanksgiving, Christmas, something like that. I was 5 years old at her house. And everybody's talking, all these animated conversations going on all around the house. And she's sitting here quietly on the couch reading a newspaper, which she suddenly puts the newspaper down and says, I have an announcement to the family. And make sure everybody stops and that they're all quiet and that they're all listening, because the patriarch or the matriarch of the family is going to make an announcement and everybody needs to listen. She proceeds to tell a story about a UFO. She and her sister were out on the plains of Kentucky around the turn of the century, and they saw a cigar-shaped UFO hovering, and it just kind of cruised by really slow. It was not far off the ground, and it was so close they saw the occupant, and he turned his head and looked at them as he flew by. So, of course, I'm only 5. I have 50,000 questions now, but at 5, I'm just like engaged, like, okay, what's this about? The looks on everybody's faces is just as interesting as the story. So whatever it is she's saying, I'm tuned in, and you could hear a pin drop, right? Everybody's listening. Grandma says that, this was a time when they had a wagon. They had never even seen a vehicle.
Right.
They lived out in the sticks, not in town. This was out in the middle of nowhere in Kentucky. And when they saw this, they had no frame of reference. Like, what is that? It didn't have any seams on it. It was perfectly polished, silverish colored alloy with a transparent bubble on the top, and they could see the guy. So,
Right.
of course, I couldn't ask, was he human? Was his head abnormally large? Did he have big black eyes, or, what? Or was he a humanoid, just a regular person, or what? But, he just cruised by. They ran home. They told their mom. She told them never tell anybody anything about that story ever again. She didn't want to hear it. And so they had only each other to confide in about this bizarre encounter. And then her sister died a couple years later.
Wow.
So, I don't know, 70 years. She had this story all to herself. And reading this newspaper article, the newspaper article was about a police chase, between some UFOs and a cop car in the county, Madera County, where she lived. And it's just like the opening scene in Close Encounters of the Third Kind that came out the next year. So that movie hadn't even been released yet. But the article she read in the newspaper that stimulated all of this, which she read the article first, and everybody's like, why is Grandma reading this UFO story? And then she puts a newspaper down, and then she tells everybody the account, and she sums it up by, I don't care what people think. Those things are real. And everybody's like, wow, Grandma, that's kind of interesting. and kind of went back into their stories,
How do we react to this information?
Right. Yeah. Angels and Jesus and,
And aliens. What are we talking
healings, resurrection.
Yeah, like what is going
Alien.
on?
How does that fit? I thought you were
Right.
talking Lord of the Rings over here, and suddenly you switched to
Right.
Star Wars. So I'm 50,000 questions hitting my mom up and like, what is that? And we watched Star Trek. And so my mom just said, Star Trek, right? It's probably more real than most people think. So I automatically just like, it makes sense. I never bought that just you got a bunch of empty space out there anyway. So even at 5 years old, it made sense to me that there's more out there. So I just accepted it. My great grandmother just accepted it. She didn't see any overbearing theological discrepancies or like, how do I work this out? Just, part of God's creation. Simple as that. She believed the Bible. She believed the ETs were real. Didn't have to go into it. But for me, I was very light on the Christian influence at a young age. I would have said I was Christian, but my knowledge is like, Daniel in the lion's den and David and Goliath, the stories that my grandmother would read.
Biblical stories, right? Yeah.
Right. I didn't pause and really think in depth about it at a young age. Like, where did this giant come from?
Right.
Exactly what kind of a giant, 9.5 feet tall. That sounds kind of unusual. 6 fingers on each hand and each toes, each foot.
Wow.
But I didn't put 2 and 2 together on any of that. But instead, the whole UFO thing really ignited me. And I got really into the paranormal. And I was always asking my mom questions. And so she subscribed to some, it wasn't Reader's Digest, but it was something else. It was like Mysteries of the Unknown. And it was a encyclopedic set. And one of these books would come every month. I actually found the name of this set. But it was like a 24 volume set. And she's, read. It's healthy, read. So I'm reading about psychometry and retro recognition and clairvoyance. And
Yeah,
I mean, I'm like Fox Mulder by 10 years old. I could tell you.
My grandmother doing that to me. I feel you so much right now.
So
Wow.
I absorbed all this information at a young age. And then as I was getting older, I wanted to know more. So I started experimenting. I got tarot cards. I knew how to do readings, dream interpretation, casting runes, looking at crystals, and got a Ouija board. Bad idea, by the way. So channeling, astral projection, remote viewing, all of that stuff. I was really into it. I think I actually ended up getting possessed at one point by a human, by a person that died who lived not far from our home. That's a whole story in itself. And I actually exorcised that spirit out of me using self-hypnosis. So bizarre story, but it was a point at which I perceived 2 consciousness simultaneously. And I demanded it leave me. And this was before I even became a Christian or dedicated Christian. So all of this to say, I was really heavily into the paranormal. I was also a bit of an academic, kind of a nerd in high school. I was really into band and left-handed, so I'm naturally just more like poetry and art and music and stuff.
Nerds unite.
Introverts unite in your house alone.
Alone. Everybody. It's fine.
So I joined the Army because I also had this other aspect of my personality that is, I call myself a nerd with a wild streak or a barbarian academic. So my mother was tomboy extraordinaire. She would chop the trees down with a chainsaw and cut them into 4-foot chunks. And we would do cordwooding in Arkansas when I lived there. So 4-H girl growing up, lived on a farm, right? So she could beat guys arm wrestling. My mom was
Badass. You can say it. It's okay.
yeah. And of course, my dad, my parents divorced when I was a kid. So I'd go live with my mom sometimes and sometimes with my dad. And my dad framed houses. So I was framing houses on the job site. And by the time I was 16, I was a journeyman carpenter. I could do all that stuff. So the Army infantry was attractive to me because it was like this glorified camping trip.
Yeah.
And, that's camping trip, add in some helicopters repelling and some interesting things. So, but the Army wasn't psychologically or culturally wasn't a super good fit for me. Yeah. So on the one hand, I could do all the running and I was in incredible shape and all of that. And I could plug right in and just do whatever, expert marksmanship and all of that. But the conversations I would like to have, I was like, I didn't fit the mold. They like to talk about women, cars, drinking, football.
Rock and roll, football.
I'm like over here pondering my existence and, life is more than what you see. And
didn't you fake astral projection in front of some of your
oh yeah brother? I have a picture where I one of my books that I have this paranormal library I acquired, and so they would come into my room and into the barracks, and my area was like this paranormal shrine with all this astral projection and stuff. And so in the Army they're pretty ruthless. They do hazing just all the time.
Yep.
And very early on in my Army career, I was singled out as the oddball, and they were relentless. These guys were just, oh my gosh, they would make fun of me to no end, and applied some harsh labels to me right away within the first 2 weeks. And I was in a cohort unit. So I was with the same group of guys for 3 years. So I didn't fit very well. And, I did find a couple guys that were sort of like-minded with me. We played Dungeons and Dragons, and we had a D&D group, and we really got into that.
At least you had an outlet. Something.
So I did have a good group of, small little group of friends that I could confide in. But other than those guys, for the most part, I was the oddball. So when the Panamanian conflict happened and we deployed to Panama, I was the M60 gunner at the time. So, there you go. So I was the firepower for the platoon, and we were doing all of our operations going all over Panama. And when we ended up at Fort Sherman, they wanted us to man the perimeter of the base and make sure nobody tried to infiltrate from the jungle. Not likely. Jungle is about as inhospitable as you can get. Everything wants to sting or bite or kill you.
It wants to eat you.
I don't even know if they had explosives in there, but land navigation in the jungle was pretty much not really feasible. There were sections of the jungle that were like, a quarter of a city block where the ground was maybe 2 inches thick, a blanket of ants just moving. If you fell down, I can't imagine. You'd probably end up being hospitalized if you made it out. Everything, the plants want to hurt you. Yep. The bugs are insane. They had a zoo behind the base with animals they caught. They had python there. They had a black panther there. And they said, be careful. These things are out here. I went into a tunnel that was in the jungle. It was a tunnel that was built during the Panama Canal construction, and because I wanted to explore it. And I thought, I got an M16, I'll shoot whatever's in here. And I got in the tunnel and I started going down.
I'd be in there in a heartbeat.
And I noticed this weird furry stuff on the ceiling. And when I looked up, the ceiling was coated with bats. And I thought, it's kind of hard to shoot 1,000 bats. I better turn around. So I ended up leaving the tunnel. But it was in that jungle where I was on guard duty late one night, and I was with, it was just me and one other guy, my team leader, and this guy was the leader of the pack of Mockery Central. This guy
Right.
was the one who made up half the nicknames that I had,
Right.
and he would constantly, part of the reason I was in good shape was because he was always dropping me for push-ups and just burning me out constantly.
Been there, done that.
Same. Oh my God, that was my life in the Navy. Keep going. Oh,
That
Anyway,
was my life in the Army.
this
Mhm.
guy was the ringleader of the guys that made my life miserable. And, you know, I mean, one example, I'm like eating my lunch, I'm starving, and he walks over and smacks my plate of food,
My
knocking it on the ground,
God.
and
Yeah.
stomps on it, and then walks away laughing to himself, you know. And I'm so hungry, I pick the food up that he just
Yep.
stomped on, and I keep eating it. So I'm with this guy, and we're at our post in the jungle. And it's about midnight, and I'm fighting off sleep and everything. Of course, the bugs that are eating me, my arms were bleeding from the insect bites. Those insects, you put bug lotion, and they like, you know,
Yep.
they
Yep.
love the bug lotion. It doesn't do anything. I was eating matches to sweat sulfur
Oh,
to
yeah.
make the
helps.
bugs leave me
It
alone,
helps.
and even that wasn't working. So
Yeah.
It helps.
terrible. I got prickly heat because of that, by the way. Don't eat matches. Bad idea. Anyway,
It,
I see this flash of light in the jungle, and it had been sheet lightning up in the sky all through the evening, where you have this sort of haziness in the sky, and you don't see streaks of lightning. Instead, the sky flutters like a sort of like a light bulb almost.
Mhm.
And so I'd been sort of filtering out light flutters in general, but there was a fluttering that finally caught my attention, and it was down inside the jungle under the trees, under the canopy of trees. It's maybe 900 meters or so in the distance. So I saw this thing light down in the jungle quite a ways out, and I didn't see what was causing it, but I kept my eye on it, and about every 30 seconds or so, there would be a flash, sort of like somebody's walking around out in the jungle with a camera taking pictures or something. I mean, I was like, what in the world is that? So I'm sort of fixated, looking out in the jungle, and it gets closer and closer. And finally, I see it's a ball of light. Like, it flashes on just an instant. It's about the size of a soccer ball by my estimate. And it was headed straight for us. Every time it flashed on, it was maybe 30 or 40 feet closer. And so I'm like, something is coming this direction, and I don't know what it is. So I'm going through the Rolodex, you know, okay, not swamp gas. That's usually kind of a greenish glow. It's not ball lightning. That's usually erratic, and it zips around until it hits something and it diffuses. This was flashing on and then off.
Mhm.
Like a camera.
Like a camera. And I'm just intently watching it. And I decided to disarm myself because I had the M60 there with 750 rounds of ammunition. And I'm like, this big metal weapon, 23-pound thing, is probably going to attract electricity. And we also had a radio, a field radio with a 6-foot whip antenna and a bunch of lithium batteries inside the pack. So I'm like, all of this stuff is a major magnet for electricity. I'm just going to set my weapon over here next to the radio. So if that thing comes over here to discharge, it's going to be attracted to that and fizzle out. So I put my weapon there and the radio there next to a tree. I got like maybe 15 feet or so away from it. And I'm just sort of standing there and looking, and this thing just keeps coming. And I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. And I look over and I'm
Did
like,
you
well, it's-
feel like something was like controlling this thing, or it was alive by itself, you know?
Yeah, that
Like,
came
and
later.
was it like organic or totally robotic somehow? What was your feeling?
It let me know exactly how it felt in a minute. As it was coming, I had a sense that there was an intelligence behind it just because it was coming straight toward us. So it was at the end of my shift, and I thought, well, this is a prime opportunity to wake up the corporal here. And this is going to be fun because this guy is the one who likes to make my life a living hell because he doesn't believe anything. Practically the world is flat with this guy, right? And this is going to be interesting. So I go and I wake him up. I said, it's time for your shift. And by the way, there's a glowing, flashing ball of light over there, and it's coming right this way. And I think it's alive. Good night. And I turn around, you know, and I had no intention of going to sleep. I just wanted to, you know, cast my line and see if he'd bite. And he did. You know, he starts cussing me out, thinking I'm messing with him.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then it
course.
flashes.
Right.
And I said, you saw that. I know you saw that. Keep your eyes fixated over there. It'll flash again. And sure enough, it did. And then I start giving this sort of creepy, you know, dialogue, you know, telling him, this is not in any biology textbook. This has the appearance of a transgenic entity. It's not quite here in this dimension. And it's coming straight here. Yeah. So I'm layering it on, right?
Oh man,
And,
he's thick. I love it.
his eyes are getting bigger and bigger, and he's not saying anything. And it finally gets to about maybe 30 feet away, and then it stops. It's maybe 30 feet up in the tree, and it keeps flashing like it's cataloging, you know, processing us, right? It reached us. Now it's observing us. Certainly had that appearance.
Right.
And I couldn't take it anymore. And I told the corporal, I said, I'm going to communicate with it. And he's, the hell you are. And I said, no, of course I am. Look, this thing's curious. And I, you know, this is my Captain Kirk moment. You know, I am going to initiate first contact. This is something
Yeah.
I'd always dreamed of, right? And he's cussing me out, telling me this thing's going to kill me. I'm going to get them both killed and, you know, get us both killed. And I'm like, if it wanted to kill us, it would have done it
You'd be
already.
dead, right?
It certainly can. Yeah. Look at the energy this thing is generating. It looks like it's pure electricity. And boy, he's upset.
Right.
He's trying to come up with explanations. You know, I think it's a laser from the aircraft carrier. I said, nope. Laser requires a clear line of sight. This thing's down in the trees. It's moving around independently. And he's like, he can't think of anything, right? No. I have these AN/PVS 7 night vision goggles on. I'm looking through these goggles. I am not seeing anything. Night vision.
Yeah.
I said, this thing is not making any noise, and it's completely invisible when it's not flashing. It is interdimensional. It's not even here. Yeah. And yet it's here. And he finally clams up, and he's just not saying anything. And then he kind of backs away from me because I go over into a clearing, right? And he's like, hell with this. You're going to be dead. So he backs away, and I'm looking off into the trees. I'm looking right where it flashed last, and I introduce myself. I say, you know, please disregard the weapon over there. I do come in peace. I mean you no harm. You could see I disarmed myself. I apologize if we're disturbing you, if this is your home and we're in your place.
Did you say this vocally?
Yes. I am mentally, introducing myself. Vocally, yes. I am just talking to it. And I said, but, you know, I'm here and I would like to get to know you. I would like, you know, if you could tell me your name or reveal yourself to me, or
let's go for a date.
I'm very interested in you. I want to know more about you.
First date.
So, you know, I don't remember my exact words, but it was just basically a greetings, right?
Yeah.
And it stopped flashing, kind of like it was processing, like, he's talking to me. And suddenly this feeling came over me. So here's where the sentient thing comes into play. At first, I thought maybe this is a probe or some kind of technology possibly deployed from a ship somewhere or something. But that kind of evaporated because what I felt was that sense of that you're being watched, but practically the eyes are beating on you, right? This is like the intense presence of something watching you amplified by 1,000. This thing was emanating, I am here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I literally felt its GPS coordinates. I felt its presence. I felt exactly where it was located in the trees. And then I felt it moving, and it was coming toward me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really intimidating. This thing was powerful, whatever it was. It emanated this very powerful presence. And I was like,
feel you
oh,
want to
crap.
touch it?
I might have stepped in it, and I
Right.
took a couple of steps backwards slowly. I'm just like, it's okay. It's okay. I mean you no harm, right? We're cool. And I'm trying not to panic. And the corporal, he's moving further away, but I finally just like, nope, don't be afraid. Just stop. So I stopped and I held my ground. I felt this thing go right over the top of my head.
Wow.
And I lifted the goggles and I'm following where I feel it. I do a complete 180. And I was talking. I'm like, I feel it moving. I feel it moving. I don't know how I know, but I know where it's at. And then I felt it pause. It stopped. So I had turned all the way around and I was looking with the night vision right at it. And I said, the next time it flashes, it's going to flash right there. And it flashed when I said the word there, exactly where I pointed. And I was amazed. I was just unglued. I was like, dude, did you see that? Did you see that? It flashed when I pointed. It flashed on cue. It knew exactly what I was saying. It knew where I knew where it was. How did it do that? How did it? So I'm just jabbering and jabbering, right? Like this thing telepathically communicated to me. It wasn't English, but it let me know, here I am. I'm alive.
And it's like it read your mind somehow.
Yes, and it let me know where it was located. Like, I am here. It just gave out this I am here thing. Even though it was invisible, I felt it as if I could see it with my eyes. And I kept talking. So this thing never really turned into a human being or an animal or anything all ultra fantastic.
No. Yeah.
It proceeded to continue to flash, and it did a complete 360 perimeter sweep of our location, flashing on and off, just like a probe would do if a probe were doing it, or something very curious and wanting to catch you from every single angle. And then it proceeded off down the jungle, and there were 2 other positions in the jungle, and it visited those 2 positions as well.
Yeah.
So I'm all chatting it up to Corporal Stinger. He's just not saying anything after that. He kind of just shut down. He was checked out. So I finally said, okay, well, I got to go to bed. I don't think I slept that night.
I don't imagine you did.
Well,
and then the next day, the other 2 positions came in, and we were going to go into the barracks that day. That was our last night in the jungle. And we were all there, and I'm like, okay, there's an elephant in the room. Nobody's saying anything, right? I saw it go down toward those other 2 positions. So being that this thing was curious as it was, I speculated that, this thing probably did a perimeter sweep on them as well. So I finally opened it up. I said, okay, nobody's saying anything. The corporal here and I saw a glowing, flashing ball of light last night, and it communicated with me. And nobody said anything, right? And I said, Corporal Stinger, you were here. You saw it. You saw me communicate. You saw what happened. Come on, say something. Did you guys see anything? And one of the guys, I'm like, I keep pressing him. And one of the guys like, I think I might have saw something. That's all I got out of him. And the other guy said, oh, I think I saw a firefly. And I said, dude, we've been seeing fireflies every day.
Yeah.
Come on. This thing was the
Yeah.
size of a soccer ball. That's not a firefly, and you know it. And he didn't say anything past that. So I know they saw something. They're not sleeping on guard duty. This is time of war. It's death penalty offense, sleeping on guard duty during time of war. I know they weren't asleep. I know they saw it. They just weren't fessing up. They didn't want to cop to it. And I'm like, what the heck's up with you guys? How come you're not saying anything? And then my corporal, he finally says, well, I know what it was. And I'm like, oh, okay, finally. He's acknowledging something happened. And I turn to him and I'm like, okay, and he says, you summoned it. And then they all started laughing. And he's like, yeah. And then they started doing a roast session on me, oh yeah, MILOR over here, he cracking out spell books and shit, and they're like making these jokes and stuff. And I'm like, really? Are you freaking kidding me? And I had to shut up after that, because every time I mentioned anything, they just kept piling on the jokes and laughing and making it a roast fest. And I'm like, unbelievable. What's more amazing? What I saw or the stupidity, the people's ability to shut down and filter out anything they can't explain.
Just total denial.
They just couldn't wrap their head around it. It was all that it was. And when they did see it, they backed away from it and used it as a way to put you down. That's
finally they enter my domain, and they're faced with something they cannot explain. And I'm already there with a catalog of things that possibly it could be.
Right.
Dungeons and Dragons, there's a creature called Will-o'-the-Wisp that lives in jungly-like areas, and it has sort of this behavior, and it tries to lure people off into the jungle to follow it. And things don't go well if you do, according to the legend. This thing behaved kind of like a curious animal, in my opinion. But being that it was time of war, I could go either way with this. This could be an alien intelligence that, was here from somewhere else. There's a long-standing history of otherworldly contact during times of war in particular. The Foo Fighters, for example,
Right.
and those things aren't always that big. Sometimes they're small. So, but this thing did give me the feeling that it was a sentient being, that this thing was alive. I do have a feeling that it might have been some sort of species that's sort of here and sort of not, maybe not native to this dimension or partially native to this dimension. It could have been another creature created by God, just another order of animal species or whatever, transdimensional, or it could have been
Did you
from another world.
Change in the environment when this happened? Like, did you feel any change in the temperature, like an eerie silence, like, all this kind of stuff when you saw this
No, I
light?
didn't notice a change of temperature. I don't recall anything like that. It might have got extremely quiet when this thing was there, but that is not something that I remember specifically. But the details I do remember is those things, I wrote them down early on when I got out of the Army, and so those things retained in terms of the details about how I felt. I felt the thing transmitting its location to me, and going through the list of explanations of, not ball lightning, not swamp gas. It came straight toward me. It stopped. It exhibited intelligence. I'm going to try to communicate with it. All of those details. But beyond that, this was 1990. So it was a while.
Wasn't this during the Panama invasion?
Yes. Yeah. When we went there to take out Noriega.
Yeah.
So John, I was born in Colombia, and the jungles all over South America, even Central America, sometimes I feel that, as much as we don't know our oceans, we don't know what we have inside our jungles there. Like,
Definitely.
so many paranormal stuff going there.
Hmm.
That,
Yes, I know somebody who was born and raised in El Salvador. A lot of similar stories. There's apparently this thing called the Chicken Foot Lady, where this person lived. And I think that's like an Aztec goddess you could look up in legends and lore. And it's basically a succubus. It's a female entity, seductive woman, but has the legs change into that of a chicken, and then these feet that are like a chicken's feet. And my friend's mother saw this thing, and it actually scratched the face of my friend's cheek because it was
wow.
standing behind their house. And actually, but this thing was known to like hypnotize men in particular. And if they spent too much time in its presence, they would go insane. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's just one legend. I also knew I had this thing that, growing up, that one of my favorite questions would always be, has anything supernatural ever happened to you, or that you witness or experience you can't explain through natural means? So I got this huge list of stories that I've gathered from family and friends over the years. And I remember a friend of mine from high school who was from Thailand told me about these creatures that have like a horse's head, similar to
Yeah.
a horse, the shape, but it had a humanoid body, extra long arms with these claws. And then partway down the torso and the legs would become semi-transparent, and then like no feet. And it would sort of just
Wow.
float around in the jungles of Thailand. And
Yeah.
if you made noise in the jungle, it would piss it off, and it would come after you and try to attack you and kill you. People have been killed by this. And he said, no, this is common knowledge. Everybody knows about this thing. And he had the name for it.
Yeah, and we grow up in schools with this mythology, that we hear also from our Indians, and this
Mhm.
got to come from somewhere, it's not
Yeah.
just.
Years later, I was a janitor for a school district. And I was cleaning the classroom one night, and there was another janitor there, a lady from Thailand also, right? And I asked her, where you come from? She said, Thailand. And I'm like, you know what? I've been waiting a long time to come across another person from Thailand. I got to test this theory. And I told her about my friend. And I said, my friend says everybody in Thailand knows about this thing, with a horse's head. And, how can it be that something that everybody there knows about it, but over here in the West, we're like, dismiss all these things. We don't even know about it.
Yeah.
And she said, oh yeah, those things are common. Almost anybody could see that. You want to see something like that, go out in the jungle. As dangerous as it is,
Yeah.
but people generally don't mess around in the jungle, and they certainly don't camp. That's how the conversation came up with my friend in the first place. I told him we should go camping, and he's like, are you crazy? We don't go out in the woods at night. Why? And he's like, because of this and this and this. And I'm like, kidding me, maybe a bear, but not that. No, we don't have those problems. And he's like, your forest very clean. And so I thought, okay, this is just superstition. But then this lady, she had even more stories. She's like, oh yeah, those creatures are common. They will kill, but they're not as deadly as some. And then she described what sounded like an elemental to me. She said that it almost killed her brother, this big black blob. And these things are so powerful, if you get near it, you start feeling sleepy. And there was certain stretch of road on the edge of the jungle. It went around the edge of the jungle. And she had a story where she said that as they were driving, some friends, she encountered this thing twice, right? Everybody in the car started getting really sleepy, and they slammed on the gas and got the heck out of there because they knew one of those things was nearby. And if you pass out, it's possible you just might not wake up. It just will kill you. Just getting near it, it sucks the life right out of you. And on another occasion, she said she was on that same road, and the car died. and her brother started passing out. She, however, was strangely immune to it. And so they had to run, and they were running, and they saw this shack, and she was trying to keep her brother awake while trying to get away because they saw this thing. They literally saw it moving through the forest. Imagine this 6-foot amoeba that's just this opaque black, and it's sort of changing shape, but it's a blob, and it's just sort of oozing along in the jungle about as fast as a person can do a brisk walk.
Yeah.
And she thought, if we go into this cabin out here, this abandoned cabin or shack, maybe this thing will go by. So she went in the cabin, and she had to focus on keeping her brother awake, and she kept shaking him, and he finally passed out, and she didn't know if he was going to live. This thing actually came to the cabin, opened the door, and came in. And she had started a fire in the fireplace, thinking maybe that would keep it away. This thing actually grabbed a couple of logs and threw it on the fire. It sat on top of the fire, like it was feeding off of the fire. I'm like, what? And she was pinned in that house with her brother. She couldn't carry him. She's terrified. And the thing finally, I guess it got its fill feeding off the fire, and it oozed out the door and left. And about 10, 15 minutes later, her brother finally woke up again, and they lived through it. So I kind of speculated that maybe she had an immunity to it because she later became a Christian. And so maybe there was something spiritually in her already that put a protective shield on her or something. I don't know. That was just some speculation. But that was one of the stories.
We do have a question for you from the chat from Andy. Could part of ascension include changes in the body?
Part of the sentient?
Ascension.
Oh, ascension. Actually, yeah, I talk about that in my book. The Bible actually talks about a process called translation, that if you're a believer, that there will become a time in the future where believers will rise from the dead, when they will be resurrected from the dead, and then they will be translated, and they'll have a new nature. And we will be like the angels, Luke 20:36 in the Bible, and we will be completely immortal and capable of dying, and we will no longer reproduce. Not that we can't, but it will no longer be a function that we do. And that is part of my book where I talk about the butterfly theory. I believe that humans were designed as a transgenic species of the highest order. From our original creation of Adam and Eve, we were designed to go through a translation, probably around 1,000-year mark or so, when we reach a spiritual level of maturity, and then we translate. The Bible mentions both Enoch and Enoch was translated. It's like he just transformed into this higher level, and he went off to heaven to be with God. Physically, he never died. Same thing happened with Elijah. He was taken up into an angelic chariot, which I believe was a UFO from a good guy. And then Moses was actually resurrected from the dead, and he was also probably translated as well. And Moses and Elijah both came down to earth to visit Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. So they were bodily alive and translated. So this happens to people. We translate into this higher angelic state of being. And I think that that's where angels have been. I think angels started out like Adam and Eve on different planets, glorified planets in the cosmos. They reproduced after their own kind, populating their planets. And then they reach this age where they go through a metamorphosis and they translate and they become immortal. So part of the population is mortal or is like pseudo-immortal. They eat from something like the tree of life to stay alive. And they populate and they have families, and then they translate and they become immortal and they become angels. So this is something that the Bible actually kind of talks about indirectly. The funny thing is, I didn't come across this until much later, and I think that just having so much like science and paranormal studies in my head when I did become a Christian later, like a full-on, like totally very dedicated believer, and reading the Bible for the first time at 21 years old. I started seeing things in the Bible that when I bring it up to other Christians, they're like, what are you talking about? And there's a lot of things that I talk about in my book, Christian Ufology, that are like assumptions that Christians make that I think are not right. For example, there's an assumption that God has hand created all angels individually rather than angels being reproduced after their own kind, like every species on Earth. To me, biologically speaking, it makes more sense that angels came about just exactly like us, except the only reason they don't reproduce is because they went through this translation and they're capable of reproduction. So in Genesis chapter 6, when you first see the sons of God actually coming down from the heavens,
Becoming enamored with human women.
and them intermarrying with human women and having children that became these giants, these Nephilim. They were unnatural. That these were fallen angels that were doing this activity. Their children were inherently evil. This is what brought the flood of Noah. So we have in the Bible that I was shocked to see interbreeding and hybrid species going on. And these angels crossed with humans and animals also, and created these weird humanoid animal hybrid species that were imbued with supernatural abilities.
Right,
That's
giants.
That's where cryptids come from, basically. And that's why a lot of cryptids they're like transgenic. They can pop in and out. I think Bigfoot, there may be a species of Bigfoot that's like a gorilla angel, literally. And that's why it is so stealthful. It could be there and not be there. And if they die, they might not, their bodies might not even stay in this dimension. It might just like disappear. And I have a lot of theories like that are kind of unusual, and they come from basically my understanding of the Bible. I read the Bible and I cross-reference it with paranormal stuff. I do retain the Christian worldview, the foundation. Part of why I wrote Aliens and the Antichrist and later Christian ufology is because I see this message. My great-grandmother didn't see this message that commonly connects extraterrestrials with evolution and panspermia, the ancient Grecian doctrine that life on Earth was seeded by aliens.
Yeah.
I can sit there and watch episode after episode of Ancient Aliens and agree with 99% of it. Like, yeah, I'm there. I'm with you. True, 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 true. And then that guy, Giorgio, gets on there and it's like, yep, the Bible, it's not really God. It's aliens. I'm like, dude, why do you got to do that? Jesus is who he said he was. And it's kind of a story in itself. But what really got me to believe in Jesus the way I do now is because I had an encounter kind of like my great-grandmother's. I didn't see Jesus. I heard him. I had a dream after I got out of the Army, and I was a party animal, and my life was just going out of control. My house was infested with poltergeists and all kind of creepy stuff going on because I was messing around with all this occult stuff at the same time, doing all kind of other party animal kind of things, mixing it in with the paranormal stuff. Some could say sorcery, maybe. But yeah, I was interested in all of that. Didn't really see a big deal. I would look at the Bible and sort of pick and choose what I liked and what was interesting and ignore the rest. But then I had a dream when I was 21, and in the dream, I was in this place looking for drugs, and I was with a friend of mine in the dream, and we ended up in this cartel compound. And there were all these dudes standing around with machine guns and stuff. And I was scared. And me and my friend were like, how do we get out of this place? It was terrifying. This dream was extremely realistic. Then suddenly this Black Hawk helicopter comes and lands. Door opens up. And we hear a voice say, get in. And so me and my friend, we're like, forget, questioning this. Let's get out of here. So we jump in. The door shuts. Helicopter takes off. But then this pilot starts flying all crazy, erratic. And he does a dive bomb with this helicopter. And we think he's going to collide into the side of a mountain. And instead, there's this tunnel for a train. And the helicopter goes into this tunnel. We're screaming like, oh my gosh, what helicopter pilot flies through a tunnel? He comes out the other side of the tunnel and there's some power lines. So I had a personal experience with power lines and helicopters in the Army. On one of our convoys, there was a helicopter flying around ahead of us and a guy hanging out on the skiff of the helicopter. He was a news reporter and he kept telling the helicopter pilot to fly lower and lower. They ended up getting tangled in some power lines and boom, helicopter crashed. One of the guys jumped out as it was going down, which you don't do in a helicopter. And he got all chopped up. It was a bloody mess. And we had to stop our convoy and police up that incident and protect the wreckage from people from coming in and trying to steal helicopter parts or whatever. So that happened when I was in Panama. So in my dream, I'm in a helicopter and I see power lines. I'm like, we're done. But no, this pilot does a flip around these power lines and then zips up into the sky. We're like glued to the seat, screaming. And finally, everything stabilizes and it's all calm. And this peace comes over us. And this was at night when it happened. But now the sunlight enters the cabin of the helicopter and it's like this golden amber light. And it's so peaceful. I'm like, oh, wow. All the stress of the drug compound and then this erratic flying just washed away. And finally this peace settled over me. And I looked out the window and there's this like endless plain of golden wheat. And it's just this beautiful scene. And I'm like, wow, this is nice. And after I have a second to breathe, I'm like, who is this pilot? And I lean forward and the seat is indented and the controls are moving, but I can't see anybody there. And I'm like, what? And I sit back and I say to my friend next to me, and I said, the pilot's invisible. How is that? And we're kind of contemplating this, and suddenly, boom, before we get time to think or ask any questions, we're landing and the door opens up and we hear a voice, get out. I jump out, my friend gets out. The voice says to my friend, you get back in. He gets back in, the door shuts, helicopter flies away. I look around and I find out I'm back in the drug compound that I started in, except it's daytime and there's all these dead bodies, blood, guts, ammo cartridges expended. There was a major firefight that must have happened there. A bunch of people got killed. So we got rescued right out of this place right before something horrible went down. And I look around and the gate to the compound was wide open. So I just sort of timidly walk toward the gate. I go through it and I'm walking down the street and I feel this weight, this enormous weight just lift from my body. And I'm feeling all of this peace and like freedom. It was so foreign to me. And then I woke up in my bed and I was like, wow, I feel really good, and I sat up in the bed and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking something significant happened. What was that? And I'm like, what was I dreaming? Okay, I remember I was with my buddy, drug coma. Oh yeah, the helicopter. Yeah, that was crazy. And I'm remembering the dream. And I finally got to the part where I looked up and I saw the invisible seat indented in the pilot. that made himself invisible. And I, talking to myself, I just said, who was that pilot? And I heard the name Jesus spoke in my ear audibly.
Wow.
And it shocked me. And then right as I heard the name, I also felt all of this unconditional love dump on me, unlike I'd ever felt before. And it's just astonishing. And I fell on the ground and I started crying, and I was like, how could he be here? And I felt like he was right there in my bedroom. And it was so real and palpable at that moment. I was like, okay, this is real. And that day, it was like Ebenezer Scrooge. He goes to sleep. He's this greedy asshole bastard. He wakes up the next day, the most generous person in the world, happy, joyful. And that's kind of what happened to me. I was just like, I had addictions at that time that just gone. And I felt like I had the option to just let things go. And so I just purged my room. I started purging my room of all kinds of things and changed like that. And I immediately made this list of like, okay, what do Christians do? Well, first of all, the first question out of my mouth was, God, what do you want me to do? That's probably a question I never asked before. If I did pray, it was, God, can you do this? God, can you do that? But for the first time in my life, I'm like, God, what do you want me to do for you? And I was immediately inspired to, hey, maybe find a church, maybe start praying, maybe read the Bible. You probably got one around here. And that's when I started reading the Bible. And as I read the Bible, something that didn't go away was years worth of knowledge about all this paranormal stuff, except I had a new foundation now. Now the Bible was my baseline, was my platform. And that was my source of truth. And everything else would compare against it, where I would search for meaning on all of this other stuff in the Bible. It turns out the Bible is the most paranormal book I ever read. And I probably would have been more interested in it early on had I been aware of these things. But, the source of all cryptids, for example, the Bible tells you where they come from. The Bible tells you about ETs a lot. I believe in ETs a heck of a lot more now that I read the Bible. And I saw, and I'm cross-referencing. So a lot of Christians, it turns out, generally, and when this first happened, I was sort of like most Christians that tend to put this demonic label on a lot of things. And I'm like, yeah, the ET thing is real. It probably has something to do with the Antichrist in the future and the strong delusion and the mark of the beast and the stuff that's coming, right, in the future, the creepy stuff in Revelation. But then as I researched, years went by, and I wrote the second book, Aliens and the Antichrist. I focus more on the ET. The first book was broad spectrum paranormal, aliens in the Bible, a biblical perspective of supernatural entities, realms of existence, and phenomenon. So I just covered this wide scope of stuff in this. Talk about ghosts, those three categories. It turns out the Bible is, a lot of people make assumptions about what and where heaven is that I think are incorrect. Heaven is literally the word shamayim in Hebrew. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but it
Shamayim.
means Shamayim.
Shamayim. Mm-hmm.
Okay, the abode of the sun and the moon and the stars. Genesis 1:14. In most instances, it refers to outer space, literally. And it is a plural word, heavens. So that opened my eyes because it's a term that the Bible uses, the host of heaven. It mentions it 18 times, literally says life in outer space.
Yes. Well, they also think God created the heavens, plural,
And
And
in the beginning,
the
God
earth.
created the heavens and the earth, Genesis 1:1. So I'm seeing this right away. And I get out Strong's Enhanced Lexicon. I'm referencing the actual words. The origin of demons, that was always something that confused me. I used to think demons and fallen angels were synonymous. They're not. The word Raphaim, I'm probably saying that wrong too. But that word has two translations, shades and spirits, and also giants. So you have this
Fine,
word,
yes.
it refers to these hybrid creatures that were part angel, part human, or part animal. And when they die, their ghosts are what we call demons. That's where demons come from. God didn't create them. God created angels. Angels rebelled. Angels went against their former estate. They reverted to their previous reproductive activities, which is a perversion of their new nature, had children, which they're capable of. And then that opened up a can of worms. Like, wait a second, I thought angels were more like ghosts. They're non-physical. And, you know, the word spiritual, oh, it's so misused and so misunderstood. A spirit actually has matter. It's composed of matter. It's a type, I'll call it an exotic matter, but it is matter. When a person physically dies, your body actually loses weight. It's a very tiny amount, but your body
Right.
does.
They actually measured it.
Yeah.
Scientists.
You see all these ghost hunters, they go and the spirits, they have a ghost box. Spirits are able to manipulate radio waves. They're able to mess with electricity, drain
Move things.
batteries, bust light bulbs, poltergeist activity. How is the spirits, how are they manipulating matter unless they are matter? They have to be composed of a type of matter in order for energy to go through them and to manipulate matter. It's a lighter kind of matter, a very fine kind of matter. You can only see it under certain circumstances. Some ghosts emit light, some ghosts reflect light. There's a difference. So there's all these scientific things in physics that you apply, which paranormal research does pretty well in a lot of these things. But take all of that way of thinking and apply it to understanding the Bible and what the Bible talks about. And the Bible actually gives you a lot of information. For example, Ezekiel chapter 1 and 10. Ezekiel encounters the wheels within wheels, and all the ancient alien guys, they all talk about it. And it goes back to Eric von Däniken, Chariots of the Gods, Zechariah Sitchin, and these other guys. And they're interpreting these ancient texts, and they see aliens, and they say aliens are angels, you know. Okay, I get it.
Do you think the snake, the Adam and Eve snake, is the snake related to reptilian species?
So a lot of people think so. I tend to think that Lucifer himself was a humanoid, an earlier version of humanoid. So we have these bones in the earth that are Cro-Magnon. And I think that they're what they call the pre-Adamite. And it turns out that Isaiah 14, the book of Isaiah chapter 14, and the book of Ezekiel 28 talk about Lucifer when he was, before he sinned. And those narratives, I study them, and Lucifer had a throne. Lucifer lived in the Garden of Eden. He walked in the garden of God. So how can Lucifer have a throne, which means he's a king? He has subjects. He has a kingdom. How can he be in the Garden of Eden and be a king at the same time with Adam and Eve given dominion over the earth? That doesn't work. This narrative is of Lucifer before he sinned, right? So this is a time predating Adam and Eve. And it is the Garden of Eden. And it turns out the Bible talks about this, and it says that Lucifer walked amidst the stones of fire. But when he sinned, he led a rebellion, and he ascended above the heights, above the clouds. So he left the Garden of Eden. His throne was here on earth. He had an actual angelic kingdom here on earth, according to the Bible. and there's a whole population on this planet. So I'm like, my gosh, finally it makes sense what the Cro-Magnon and these other humanoid species, they were here. According to the Bible, they were here. But they died because they hadn't translated yet. And I already kind of talked about that. They were mortal and had to eat from something like the tree of life, so it's possible to kill them. And they sinned.
Yeah.
So they died, and their bones are in the earth. But they, unlike us, Adam and Eve sinned early on, so they didn't get to translate. So we're all mortal, all of us humans. But part of their population was immortal, Satan being one of them, Lucifer. When he sinned, he became Satan. And they led this rebellion into God's kingdom, and Michael basically overthrew Lucifer, destroyed the rebellion, and cast Lucifer back down to earth. So that was another question, like, why the devil gets thrown down to earth? That never made sense to me. And I would ask Christians that why earth of all places, why throw him here? Well, it's because his kingdom was here. It started here. The rebellion started here. And that's why Jesus came here to end the rebellion. He created humanity. He became a human. He went to the cross, died on the cross, and he put an end to the rebellion on the same planet that the rebellion started on. So it makes a lot more sense why Earth is central to the picture of everything in the cosmos.
Hey, Nas,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think?
I so many things that have been covered.
Yeah.
But, and it's like I have a different background information, but I'm familiar with all the things that you're talking about. I was a pastor's kid.
Okay.
So the scriptural readings before school in the morning were mandatory. And then later on, I did, theological studies at school for long enough to push me in a different direction. But yeah, I'm familiar with the things that you're talking about, and one of the quirks is the word that's used for the encounter in the garden isn't snake, it's serpent.
Yeah.
That's nachash. And it's, that word itself, especially throughout the ancient contexts, and especially when you move across the translations of the other cultures from the region, Mesopotamians, Romans, Greeks, and so on, you find that word itself isn't about the description of the being, it's a description of the character.
Right.
And it's kind of like, the word sorcerer means a corrupt magician.
Yeah.
Right.
And in Latin, pharmakai, and it ties directly to the use of drugs in relation to sorcery.
Right.
And Satan actually means accuser. So it's not a formal name. It's more like
exactly. Just like Lucifer means
light bringer. Yeah. So anyway, I thought it was interesting that after Lucifer was put down and Michael ended his rebellion, which I think was blowing up a planet that no longer exists and is now our asteroid belt. I think Lucifer, his kingdom spanned beyond this earth. He had, populated Mars, probably populated this other planet that is now our asteroid belt, maybe Saturn. But when that planet blew up, I'll call it Astera, a chunk of it hit Earth and wiped out everything. Destroyed his kingdom, wiped it out. A chunk of it hit Mars, obliterated it through the ocean and the atmosphere out into space and destroyed it. The moon, which they now know that there's a dome on the dark side of the moon and all this other stuff that they've been hiding for years. I know that a lot of it is up in the air and but I seriously, I think that there's stuff there. We probably have bases on the moon and whatnot. I don't doubt that. And it got destroyed. The dome that's supposedly on the dark side of the moon, and China went there to fetch some of that material because it's some exotic meta material. That's why they wanted to go there. That was destroyed. And Saturn, the rings of Saturn, actually spin perpendicular to its orbit, which is bizarre. Here you have this planet, here's the sun, and this planet spinning around. You would think the rings would spin in the same rotation, but no, they're perpendicular. They're like this as it's spinning like this. It's bizarre, like something hit it and twisted it 90 degrees. So there's evidence of something huge that exploded in our solar system and wiped out everything and created this darkness. And in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, so it starts out, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And immediately, right after that, it says, and the earth was void and without form. So you don't overlook those. Look up what those words mean. Tohu is the word that talks about void, and it's more like a destructive act, apparently, when you read it in the original translation. So it's kind of like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Done. It's created, and it exists for who knows how long. Could be millions, could be billions of years. And then the earth was destroyed. So that is the first reference to the destruction of Satan's kingdom on this earth. And there's other ones, and I point them out in Christian ufology. But this advanced civilization that was once here, wiped out. But there are traces. I believe there are traces of that earlier civilization still here, like in Antarctica. And I know from my military background, I heard rumor of something in Antarctica miles beneath the ice. And I've also heard whistleblower testimony from Navy SEALs about that. And Christians shouldn't be alarmed to hear that. And in fact, it's evidence of Satan's kingdom, Lucifer's kingdom, that was here a very long time ago. So when he was defeated by Michael, Ezekiel 28 says he was no longer allowed to walk amidst the stones of fire. So I'm like, okay, what is the stones of fire? Walking amidst these stones. I don't think these are pebbles on the ground in the garden. I think for an archangel with the clout, power of Lucifer, one of the most powerful beings, that stones of fire, walking amidst the stones of fire, is a reference to solar systems. These are like stones that are literally on fire. They're entire solar systems throughout the galaxy, because Lucifer's kingdom was vast. Revelation 12:4 says the dragon dragged a third of the stars from the sky. Stars, these stones of fire. And he cast them down to the earth. So this is his rebellion, which is cosmic. This is literally Star Wars in the Bible, talking about Satan going throughout maybe millions, billions of years in this rebellion that he had against God, spreading these lies, spreading this rebellion, corrupting the entire cosmos. And I believe our universe itself isn't a universe. I believe it's a multiverse. That every planet is a multidimensional construct. Imagine an onion. And I actually have a diagram of this on my website, but imagine an onion with all these layers, right? It's a bunch of lithospheres layered on top of each other. And hell is literally described geographically as in the heart of the earth. So when people are talking about heaven and hell, it's not as black and white as people think. Hell, there's some layers of hell that are like right up here on the surface. They're dimensionally shifted. So it depends on what a person's vibrational frequency is when they die. But unlike a lot of Christians, they go off of Jesus's description of Lazarus, and the rich man. And he's talking about, he's down in the torment part of hell, and he sees Abraham over in Abraham's bosom, and there's this chasm in between. That's such a black and white, cut and dry depiction. But hell is actually a much larger, that was the lowest hell, right? And Earth is actually a smaller planet in a lower dimension. So it literally is hell in a lower dimension. But then there's all these other layers of existence on top of that, all the way up to this planet. Where we're at here is like Middle Earth. So J.R.R. Tolkien might have been onto something with that. And then Actually, heaven, the Bible talks about heaven as there's 3 heavens, according to what it says in the Bible. The basically break down into 3 categories. Heaven that is on earth, which is in a higher dimension. It's in our upper atmosphere. And I postulate, taking from Revelation, it says in the future, God is going to move New Jerusalem, his capital, where his throne is located, and he's going to move it to planet Earth in the future. And it gives the actual dimensions of this city. It's 1,500 miles high. It's a 1,500 mile, wide and long and high. If you're going to have a city 1,500 miles high on this planet, think about it. This would have to be a much larger planet, like 272 times larger, because Mount Everest is about 5 miles high. So around the 5-mile mark, you're starting to not breathe anymore. 10 miles, you can't breathe. You're out in space.
Yeah.
This is 1,500 miles high, so you need a much larger planet to accommodate that. So take that onion concept of this planet and expand it. First heaven, Earth is a much larger planet, but it's very much a physical, real planet. And there's beings up there. And in Deuteronomy chapter 32, there's a reference to God assigning these beings, the Watchers, B'nai Elohim. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but these beings, Enoch referred to them as the Watchers. They're actually assigned regions all over this planet. And they're in the first heaven of this planet. And Lucifer's the prince of the power of the air. In the book of Ephesians, describes him as that. So Lucifer still has power on this planet in a glorified realm, but he's still restricted to just this planet. And second heaven is outer space. And imagine all these other planets out there. They're also multidimensional. So you're talking about alien life that's out there in the vastness of the cosmos. What, some 70 septillion stars out there? That's a 7 with 22 zeros after it, right? And that's for stars. Stars have multiple planets. So it's so many, you can't fathom it. And then take on top of that multiple dimensions. Mm-hmm. So the beings that are coming here are both interdimensional and interstellar. And
so I'm trying to make this connection between, your experience. You said you heard Jesus. Now, my question would be, sometimes we hear from experiencers that it is used or disguised as something that will be more comfortable for you to receive, So in your case, you had already like a Catholic background, let's say, with your grandmother, that she also had a sighting. So maybe was this Jesus' voice an alien voice? But you heard it as Jesus for you to make you comfortable on it.
Well, the thing is, back then, I probably would have been perfectly open to the idea of Jesus being an ET. I was more New Ager than I was Christian. But when he said his name, it came with such authority. There was a knowledge implanted with it. He is who he said he is.
But perhaps you were getting a download.
I do believe I was. And I didn't even know about the doctrine of the Trinity. What's packaged in that word Messiah. God literally in the flesh. But as I read the Bible, I finally understood, okay, the Trinity, Jesus is the King of the universe. He became a human being. And the book of John is basically starts just like the book of Genesis. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among men. And all of these things, when I saw them in the Bible as I was reading it for the first time, it's like the light turned on. And I'm like, okay, I understand that now. I understand it. It's no longer abstract, and it's no longer,
Yeah.
it's more like the words now are connecting with the meaning behind the words.
But I have to say, I have to add something here, John, that almost is exactly the same thing as starseeds, people that incarnate as human on the planet, but they're from somewhere else.
I've heard that. And that sort of opens up the conversation of possession, which I got into that in my book because I studied reincarnation and evidence of reincarnation. And with what happened to me, I believe that what reincarnation is actually being possessed by a person who was once alive, which is reincarnation technically, except the traditional concept of reincarnation is you die and then you come back as another person, right? You're born as another person, as opposed to what I think it really is. Because I think everyone who is born is their own unique created being. God knows us in the womb. Says in Scripture, I believe in Jeremiah or no, David, in the Psalms. So God knows who we are created in the womb. And in Hebrews 9:27 says, man is appointed unto man once to die and then the judgment. I don't take that as a hard and fast rule because, what do you do about resurrection?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
however, I think in general, each individual human being that is born is their person, that they're created in God's image the way God intended. They're
Right.
not a recycled person. However, if you have ghosts all over the place, and if a demon can possess a person, I think a disincarnate human spirit can also possess a person. Same thing. And if you're possessed by another person, you're going to have that other person's memories popping in and out. You're going to feel things that a other person felt. You're going to feel like you're that other person because part of you literally is. And I've actually experienced this myself. So I'm talking from personal experience that it is literally like you feel like you were someone else. But in my case, I knew it was possession because I knew the guy when I was a kid. And he died in his 20s. So I used to be babysat at a house where this guy was at. And I remembered him. But then I was playing in an area that I later found out that's where he died. He drowned in an area where I was playing when I was a kid. And when I put myself under hypnosis, and I had a dream that I had drowned at this place, at this canal. And I was sort of just aimlessly wandering around, and I saw this little kid, and I walked up and I tapped him on the shoulder and I popped into his body. And then I was looking around and kind of confused. Turned out that little kid was me. And I was remembering when the other person who possessed me, popped into my body. And my personality changed slightly at that age. I remember I used to love navy blue. That was my favorite color. Changed to green. Certain trends and characteristics of my personality changed when I was a kid. And all of this flooded my head when I finally realized what had happened to me. It freaked me out. And I think the guy who possessed me actually forgot. He just kind of absorbed into me and forgot that he was there until I put myself under hypnosis following the script and creating a tape for myself to listen to. I thought I just passed out and went to sleep. But then when I woke up, I heard the tape say, 10, you are now fully awake. So something happened. And I was like, what the heck? And then I remembered that having this dream of being this person floating around, drowning and then floating around and then jumping into a kid's body. So that's why I think that I actually was possessed by someone, and I cast him out. I said, get out of me, I rebuke you.
Yeah.
You have to leave. And I think he left because then a lot of my original personality kind of came back in over time. And those other residual effects, for the most part, kind of trickled off. I think maybe a little bit of it stayed, but not a lot. I don't think that guy was such a great guy either, but, Anyway, that's
do have
what I think reincarnation mostly is. It's people being possessed, and can a person be possessed by something from another planet? Sure. For all we know,
I do have a question for you. With all the knowledge that you have gained since you were in Panama, up to date, do you truly accept the fact that alien life is real, that it's visiting Earth, that it has made
past that
that it has made an impact on society, and that eventually perhaps we'll get some transparency? Now, why people want that from the government, I will never know, because I personally believe, and I think most of my panel accepts this as well, that we, the people, such as myself, Nos, Polly, and Odessa, and yourself, John, are going to be the ones that share the information, that convince those who are open to it, who have awakened enough to the truth to realize that life out there exists away from here. Life in other dimensions and other realities exists, which encompasses your Christianity and UFO narrative. Life in other forms exists, such as that ball of light you saw in Panama going on and off like a camera, which, by the way, I see an awful lot here where I live. I see bright balls of silver light that flash, and then they go off, and they move, and then they flash again. They might flash 3 times, and then they're gone. But I do see them.
Yeah.
So you're not alone, and we wanted you to know that. We're going to go down the panel and take last questions from the panel. So Nos, go ahead.
Yes. So the primary question I want to ask is, from where you're going in your learning and discovery process, and like through your chain of books, you're sharing that with others, right? So they get to watch as that thought process evolves. Looking to the future, where do you think you would like to see the paths of information open for you more? I mean, are you still wanting to look into the ancient manuscript side of things, or are you looking more for what's influencing people in the here and now?
All of the above, but I am particularly interested, man, if there's any ETs listening to this broadcast, please come visit me. I want to know some and have an interview firsthand.
Me too.
I didn't finish what I started in Panama. Okay.
Right.
So I'm ready for more. And if they want to know about Jesus, I got some information there, because that's another section in my book called Cosmic Salvation. I think a lot of them visit because they want to know about the King of the universe. Heaven actually has a capital. The Bible talks about it. It's in the north. There's a glorified planet up there in Psalm 75 and 45 and Isaiah 14 talks about heaven being in the sides of the north. That's the highest third heaven where God's throne is. I have a mission. It's called the mission of the first angel. So in the book of Revelation, chapter 14, verse 7 and 6, it says there is an angel flying in the heavens preaching the gospel to every tribe, every language, every tongue, every people all over the earth. So this is a good guy in the future. When all this craziness about the mark of the beast and all that stuff, that's in Revelation 13, and the Antichrist and this craziness is going on, then there's going to be good guys. So I'm actually predicting that there's going to be ETs, like human looking, showing up in spacecraft, and it's going to flip people out. Like Christians are going to be like, how do I interpret this? My great-grandmother would be like, yeah, no problem. I get it. That's what a chariot looks like. It doesn't look like this thing with wheels, right? Why would it have wheels? It's flying, it doesn't have wheels. So a lot of this thing is just common sense. Shifting your way of thinking fantasy, switch over to a little bit more sci-fi in order to understand what you're reading, but it's all the same stuff. And the message of that angel is, remember who the creator is. Get back to the roots. These beings in the Old Testament, these B'nai Elohim, they were not good guys. They all wanted to be worshipped as gods. They still want that. They want us to idolize them. They want us to look at them and think of them as our gods, as our creators. They're not. The flood of Noah should have taught us a lesson. And there's a lot of people that still haven't learned from that because they're still coming. It's just a new skin on the same deception. Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. So will we have open contact? Yes. Jesus predicted it. He says it could be just like the days of Noah when these things were here and interfacing and interacting with us. We already know they're here and interacting in these top secret government circles, but I think it's going to be a lot more out in the open. We're seeing the very beginning of it. Soon we're going to enter a time when something big is going to happen, and it's going to be undeniable. It's going to be in your face.
Right.
It's going to be like the opening scene of Independence Day, something like that. And they will be here, and it'll be like, okay, this is the reality in which you must understand things from now on. And theologians are going to have to go, okay, I got to revisit the Bible and think about different ways to interpret Scripture and still be a Christian. Other people who don't really have it in their heart, they're just going to be like, I don't know, crisis of faith. And that's happening right now in the Pentagon with people that were raised in a Christian home, didn't have a super solid foundation, or they didn't have an encounter with Jesus like I had. And it's throwing them, they just like, okay, my faith is just like, whatever. It doesn't reconcile. And they didn't work it out. But whatever happened to me, that combination of stuff that happened to me since my early childhood to now, helped me to connect the dots and figure out, okay, it actually is real, and it literally makes more sense. The Bible makes more sense. The gospel makes more sense with this otherworldly reality coming into focus. Okay. And that's what that book is, combination of ancient alien stuff, but it's in actual current events and all kinds of that. But it also pulls in theology, and it shows you, and it makes actually, it complements the Bible, and the Bible
Right.
complements it.
Right. Okay, Polly?
Well, first, I want to say thank you, John. This was so interesting. Awesome conversation. All the Panama event is just amazing. I just wish we had more time to talk about it. I guess I would like just to make to match together the 3 dots between you, ETs, and the Bible. So what would be like the message for humanity? You know, we are seeing all the planet right now in a pretty tough situation. Where is this going? What is the message? Do you have any kind of message for us?
We're in for some big things in the future. And I feel like I'm just trying to prepare people for what's coming, because it's a lot of stuff that's coming. That's why for anybody that wants to know more, I will email my books out for free. So my email address is jmilor@yahoo.com. It's also, my email address is on my website here, but I have other websites that are the same names of my books. ChristianUFology.net, aliensinthebible.com, ChristianUFology.net, thestrongdelusion.net, aliensinthebible.com. All of these books, they have landing pages. And then, of course, my name, you just type my name in Google, you can find my website. But email me. And, it did take 30 years research. So it's lost a lot of money trying to market my book. So I literally gave up on trying to break even. So whoever wants a copy of any of my books, just email me. I will email you a free copy of my book.
Awesome.
Be nice if you gave me a review in Amazon. Even tell me, hey, this sucked. You're wrong on this or this. Or if you have points that you want to debate, I am totally open to that. And I actually learn a lot from a lot of people, because I am not like, I know it, and I'm being so dogmatic that I am right and you're
Yeah.
wrong, and period. Right? Nobody learns anything that way.
Yep.
I like to ask why. I like to be like, you know, and a lot of Christians don't like
Awesome.
that, you know. So I am not opposed to any kind of debate, and as long as it's civil, respectable.
Right.
But yeah, email me. I'll email my books for free, and you learn
Great.
whatever you
I
want.
will. I will.
There is a book that you need to read that was put out by NOS called Conspiracy Prime. She has a PDF link that I'm sure she can put in
Yeah.
the private chat
Yeah.
for you to read. I think it will open your eyes to several things that are going on. And it concerns celestials. So that's really interesting. So you need to take a look at that if you can, John. Also, if anybody is interested in picking up a copy of this book, email John MILOR at johnmilor.com. His email will be there.
J Myler.
J Myler.
jmyler at yahoo.com. But it's on my web. That email address is on this website right here.
Right,
So.
that's what I was referring to. Okay,
Yeah.
so J Myler at yahoo.com.
Yahoo. Mm-hmm.
It's amazing anybody's still on Yahoo, but okay.
That shows you
Yeah.
how long I had that account.
Gotcha. I used to be Hotmail, and now I'm Gmail. So there
Yeah,
you go.
I was AOL, and
Yeah, I think my first email account was AOL. Yeah, that was a way back. Okay, well, anyways, thank you, John, for coming on tonight. I really
Thank you,
enjoyed our
John.
discussion prior to when you came on, when we had the discussion last night on the phone. The fact that we hit it off, we kind of bonded over our U.S. Army experiences. That's very cool. Keep in touch. I would like you to keep in touch. And also, you're invited to come back on so we can continue this discussion with everybody in the chat room that watched tonight and everybody that participated online. Okay?
Sure. I have a million stories too. I mean, like what my sister saw. Was it a ghost? Was it an alien? Was it a time traveler? We have no idea. But I have a lot of crazy stories like that from my family and friends, and I could just talk for hours about just stories.
Okay, well, we'll bring you back on. We intend to have a part
we
2
will.
with John Myler. Is Odessa still around, Nos, or is she laying down?
No. Yeah, she's out. It was a long day. She had her stress test at the doctor, so they make you do the whole treadmill thing. It's awful.
Right. So okay. Well, all right. So we're going to say thank you to everybody who participated in chat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to my new member, Brain Bender's Banter. Thank you for the super chats from the same person, Chrissy, who is going to be appearing on our channel next week. Christina Sharp, she served on board the CVN 72 USS Abraham Lincoln as an airman, and she was witness to multiple Tic Tacs in February of 1995. So we hope you can come and enjoy that information and that testimony as well. We wish you a very happy 4th of July to everyone tomorrow. Be safe. Have a great holiday. Also, John, thank you for your service again. And we thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts for you to come on our channel. We really do.
All right. Thank you. Shalom,
All
shalom.
right. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week. And we hope for you to come and see us at the Christina Sharp interview. Okay. That's 9 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, 7/10/2024. Good night, everybody.
See you
Good night.
next time.